In addition to that, I'm proposing a new system which will be to rate your lecture, to actually rate the lecture that you've been in, and this should prompt a more responsive system.
I mean, there are systems like that already in place. What makes yours so different?
Well, it's not integrated into the student union as we speak.
Why should it be, though? Why should it be?
Why should it be? Because, well, it's a feedback loop, and the standard of lectures will improve gradually if students actually give feedback to the professor or to the lecturer on what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. And in addition to that, just quickly, I'd just say that small society events have to be promoted more, even if it's a society with just 15 members. They have to be promoted more instead of the dominant block, big societies. And ultimately, just to go to prove as a testament to the lack of engagement in the student union, we have student trustees. But I bet nobody in this room could probably name every single student trustee off the top of their head. That's because nobody's heard from them. Nobody approaches us. Nobody, in essence, comes to us when they're meant to represent us. So.
Okay, Shazwat, you've been eagerly waiting for your opportunity.
In one bit, he covered one of the points which I was trying to say was the society engagement thing. I think when I applied to King's, there were 260 societies, and every few months I hear a new society being formed. So I presume there are at least 300 societies. Yeah. And with these societies, I think this is where the role of the vice president, activities and development comes in. The president and the VP AD need to work together to ensure that such small societies, like even the smallest of societies, like he pointed out, are well advertised. Like, I'm being president of India Society, I know that the computer screens and the screens at the shack are meant for a society advertising. But I have never seen more than 20 or not more than 30 societies having advertising over there when there are more than 300 societies.
It's in fact very interesting that you mentioned that about these sort of screens. I mean, you said actually in your manifesto, only 12% of these societies use these in 2018-19. Well, do you not think that there's a reason for that? Simply because these screens don't achieve what the KCLSU advertises that they would. Why would a society waste time with a screen like that, which people don't really look at, when they can get far better advertising space online via Facebook, social media in general?
No, but I think that totally depends on the society, because I feel in my activity and president and treasurer training, I was not even informed about this. It is just the previous president conveyed it to me, so I know about it. Like, if I think it is apt for my society or not is, in my opinion, the decision of the society. And we should at least give the societies a chance. Like, I totally respect your point that it might not be very useful, but the fact that they don't even know, the societies don't even have a forum. When I say, for instance, I have to do a collaboration event with another society, I need to find out from my friends who the president is, and then ask them to give a brief talk about me, and then try contacting them on Facebook. Like, I think this is the role of the union and the vice president of activities and development altogether, and not Facebook or my friends.
One other point I want to raise about your manifesto, which I thought was very interesting, that is very much about engagement as well as diversity, is that you say that you want a full-time international students officer. Now, certainly the position you're all going for, and all of the other VP positions are positions that are salaried full time. Having an international students officer would be very expensive. I'd like you to comment on whether you think that it would be worth the sort of money. And I'd also like to know, out of all five of you, do you think that the presidential role deserves the amount of money that it gets, which is in the tens of thousands? And I'd like to hear, after Shazwat, I'd like to get a few hands up to see. So, yeah.
Firstly, I think in a student union which is supported by a college that is paying 80 or 75 million per year for Bush House, 26,000 pounds for an officer that will overlook more than 50% of the students, in my opinion, should not be a challenge. Like, whether we should have it or we should not have it is, in my opinion, it lies in the trustee board, the next KCLSU team, it lies in their hands. But coming to the affordability bit, I think with proper lobbying, this should not be a challenge. Like, I think I haven't been into the sabbatical team, so I cannot be very specific about the details here. But this is an outsider's opinion, that when any student is paying so much to such a premium renowned institution, you cannot say that this is wrong. Like, at least we should see if we should do an analysis, and if we see that it is legitimate and it is apt to have such a position, I think money should not be a hindrance at that level.
Thank you. Claudia, do you think the president is worth that salary?
I mean, I don't.
You don't. So you would be willing to take a reduction?
And yeah, I would.
Okay.
Just because. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, please. No, very briefly, please.
I think just in the past, like, our presidents, I mean, they've all been amazing people, and I think they've all been great. But I just feel like there's not really been much change for how much they're being paid. And like, if I'm going to be paid that much, like, I want to know that I'm going to be working for it, and I'll work hard for it. But like, I'm going to have to do it so you guys can see that I'm working hard for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Antoine,
Yeah, no, I agree that it's, let's say, really well paid.
so you would take the cut?
Sorry?
You would take the cut?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
After, like, yeah.
Yep. Shazwat?
I don't really know the salary, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. Danny?
Yeah, I think we should be real. No one up here in reality will take the cut, and neither would anyone in the audience if they were in opposition.
Yeah, I really feel that.
And Carrie, finally from you, would you take a cut?
I think I would, because I think everyone should be paid by what they do, by what they actually deserve. It's like in a job. Like if you get paid, I don't know, £11 per hour and you just stand and do nothing, then someone who's actually hardworking gets the same pay, and it's like, yeah, that's just like just unfair.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to have to go to Q&As, I'm afraid, because we
I wasn't
really...
able
Go
to
on,
speak
Shazwat,
on
very
democracy.
quickly.
One point I just like to, I really like what he said, and I feel like if this decision totally relies on the entire KCLSU team, and I think a president should not be that one person who takes this decision. And I really agree that once it's very difficult for any individual to accept that cut. Like,
Okay, thank you very much.
Irrespective of the fact that I don't really know the salary. yet.
Sorry, Anton, I really have to...
Yeah,
move
but
on, I'm afraid.
everyone has spoken on democracy except me.
We will have to go on to the Q&A. I'm really, really sorry.
Yeah, but
we
like,
are running out of
everyone-
time. Could we have some questions? Bobby Liao, another one of our fantastic VP Sabs. Could we have a mic to him, please?
Hang on, one moment. So, my phone's locked. One moment. Right, here we go. So, just a point of clarification that we don't earn 26,000. We actually earn 23,995 before tax, and the average graduate salary in London is £27,000. So, as in for a graduate job. So, knowing this information, would you still decide to take the cut? Would you still think it is not justified for people who are essentially sacrificing 1 year of their working life to work for students to take what is essentially a £3,000 cut under the average graduate job salary?
Has anyone's opinion changed? No? Antoine, you had your hand up first.
Not change, but just I agree with you, Robert. But there is also the point that it's a gap year, kind of. You know that you will do that only for 1 year, and you're working there for students. You're not here for personal enrichment or for earning a lot of money and try to have the best jobs after graduation. You know, you're here to serve students. So
Yes, I thought it was very interesting, Antoine, in your manifesto that you mentioned that you were not doing this for personal gain and that you were entirely self-sacrificing. It was an interesting clarification that you wanted to make. Carrie, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, if people are like unhappy with the pay, then they can always like have a weekend job. You know, it's always possible to have like a part-time position somewhere else.
Easier for some, less easy for others, no doubt, though. Danny?
I think one thing's for sure, Robert makes a good point in terms of what he just said. But it's a position really which you apply for, and you know the circumstances when going into it. It shouldn't be totally up to us what the salary is. I'm definitely sure that Robert is, well, to be honest, amazed that he even got the position after dressing up and disrupting free speech in an event and putting a balaclava on to protest with Antifa. So, but there you go.
Fantastic.
Listen,
Anybody
let's
else will have anything to contribute? No. All right, fantastic. We will move on now to our fourth question, and that comes from Virginia Vasileva, who is a journalist at Raw News. Virginia, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I think we all can agree that the safe space policy has drawn much controversy on campus as well as nationwide. So I would like to know, do you think that the safe space policy is fit for purpose? And do you plan to tackle this dissatisfaction or let the issue simply lie? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Danny, I think we'll probably start with you. You have championed free speech at this university as the president of the Libertarian Society, and before so, what do you have to say about safe space, and what policies do you have in place?
Well, one thing I'd say is that the safe space comes from a very good place. It comes from the willingness and the determination to protect minority students from offence, to protect minorities in general from having their feelings hurt, to stamp out radical views because they are in defy of the safe space policy. But it actually has the complete opposite effect. And I think this is something that people need to know. The safe space policy merely serves as a mechanism to narrow the parameters of debate and to narrow the band of accepted speech, what's accepted in a given arena. And in addition to that, are we really going to let a student union, which everybody in this room acknowledges is disconnected and out of touch, define the standard for what is hateful speech and what is within the safe space policy and what's not? What I've proposed instead is there should be an opt-in safe space policy. The mandatory safe space policy, which is determined by a risk assessment on all events, should be abolished. But if a society, for example, wants to hold an event on, let's say, a very sensitive topic like suicide or mental health, and doesn't want any disturbances, they can opt in to have the safe space policy. But it certainly shouldn't be an imposition. It only serves ultimately to shelter students from new ideas, and we don't know how far it's going to go. If we're following on a trajectory of the United States and other universities around the country, it's going in a very dark, dark direction.
That's very interesting, Danny. Many people would say that given a lot of the recent incidents involving controversial and often dangerous incidents, such as the one that you mentioned earlier, the one involving Antifa last year, many people would say that having safe space marshals is an absolute necessity, given that that sort of thing is entirely prevalent. What would you say to those people?
Well, in many ways, I'd say the safe space marshals being there was like a do not enter sign for Antifa. It was almost inviting them to go in. If you deploy safe space marshals in the given forum, it almost indicates that dangerous speech is being perpetuated and that they should intervene. It feeds into this narrative that they should somehow champion this disruption of free speech, and it plays into that narrative. And ultimately, just back on that Antifa thing, I think it's disgraceful that happened. We allowed it to happen even on our university for people disguised to actually crash into a lecture theatre, steal a microphone away from the speakers, actually hospitalize a security personnel. It's disgusting. It should be condemned in all forms.
Thank you very much. Shazwa, let's go to you. Danny has said a lot there. What would you like to unpack?
I think like a few things which I would also like to add is it should be at the discretion of the event organizers also, because like obviously it is very important that everyone has that freedom to say whatever they feel, but we need to ensure, like, we need to have proper mechanism to ensure that, say for instance, if I have a valid point, I do not escalate my sentiments to the effect that I'm actually affecting or hurting someone else, like he pointed out. Whatever the situation might be, I think we need to have sufficient mechanisms on those grounds, that whatever the topic might be, like even the small topic, say for instance, discussing any sport might even get controversial if we have a lot of feelings involved in it. So on those grounds, it is important that we monitor them very well. And I don't think it's actually justified that we, given the freedom of speech ideologies, we actually hurt anyone's feelings. And I think we should have.
So you're saying you want absolutely no reform of the safe space policy?
I think it should be neutral. We should stand neutral on this, and I think it should.
What do you mean by neutral? What do you mean by neutral?
It should be seen as a case-by-case basis. You can't, like, some things, in my opinion, we
But
cannot.
wouldn't that involve a lot of bureaucracy?
That would involve a lot of bureaucracy, but I feel, what is the purpose of democracy if you're not actually catering to the rights of any sort of minority?
So what do you think about the current plans for reforming the safe space policy that have been, the current plans to reform the policy that is being instigated by the current elected SABs?
So I think, like, that the current policies which are here, I think they're totally, like, I think they're very comprehensive and they should be going ahead too.
Okay, thank you very much. Claudia, you look a little bit concerned. What would you have to say about this?
No, concerned, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we are, people in this room, people at this university, like, we're going to become doctors one day, we're going to become lawyers, we're going to become politicians, journalists, teachers. Like, I think it's good for us to be exposed to a certain extent to a level of, like, controversial debate. Like, I think it educates, it helps us decide where we stand our ground. And I mean, I'm not saying that we should be encouraging, very, controversial speakers, and we should be encouraging the acts of violence, because that isn't what it's about. But, encouraging debate and encouraging a lively debate is necessary at university.
So you would have the safe space policy as it is, or you would reform it?
I would have the safe space policy as it is currently. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think.
I mean, you've mentioned in your manifesto that you are opposing Prevent.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you see whether that might perhaps be a little bit contradictory?
No, I know. Yeah.
No, I'm purely just out of interest. What would you say?
I guess I oppose that aspect. So
Which aspect?
I oppose the Prevent aspect. I think, there have been incidents in the past, and there has been violent repercussions for it. for allowing controversial speakers. But I think debate should be encouraged, and maybe if we did it where we would ask people to hire a space outside of university grounds, if they really want to take it that far, with their speakers, choice of speaker.
More money, though, a lot more money potentially to spend on it.
Is
Perhaps more
potentially.
bureaucracy. I mean, there's already a very
Yeah.
long waiting process of 15 days to get external
Yes.
speakers in. I mean, tricky.
Yeah,
Okay, Carrie, let's come to you. Interesting again, your manifesto doesn't mention free speech at all. I mean, you talk about dialogue between peers, between people, becoming more welcoming, but is this perhaps a naive approach to a far bigger issue involving what many people would consider their rights to say as they feel? What do you think?
So I definitely think that people should say what they have to say. Like I'm personally like myself a person who just says, like whatever I think. I think people should do the same. However, it's also a kind of thing how they try to bring their point across. Like if, for example, like if I would look at someone and be like, I don't know, like I don't like your dress because it's ugly, for example, then of course the person would get offended. But if I say, I don't like the color in your dress, but I don't know, it looks nice on you or whatever, then it kind of it's a different approach on how to bring the point across. And I think that maybe this is something that we should focus on, in order not to make people feel offended, to make the point across in a, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Bruno. Thank you very much. Antoine, let's get to you and your manifesto. Certainly, you had a very interesting take on, I mean, you use the word violent troublemakers. You've talked about making sure that individuals are punished accordingly when there are violent incidents. What are you trying to say here? Obviously, you think that not enough is done to make sure that there are disciplinary methods, but does that mean that you want safe space or you want it reformed?
No, I'm clear on that. So I want to leave the safe space policy because I think that there is already protection by the law. You can't discriminate someone in the country. But I think that, and it's a bit different than Danny in the way that he says there should be a safe space for which you opt in, while I'm saying that each society should be free to have its own safe space. They can do less, they can do more than what they can put what they want. Each society should be able to have its own laws. For instance, in the LGBT plus society, we do have always sober committee members at events. It's not a compulsory thing. We're not going to impose that to everyone, because if we did do that, it will impose that to the fine wine society, and I'm not sure that they want to have to be sober always. So I think that societies should be in charge of protecting their members and their events. And I think that by dissolving the safe space marshals, we could spend, this is what I said at the beginning, we could spend the money spent on marshals, on mental health, on counselors. And that, we just shouldn't impose on others laws, but we should protect groups. Each group should be able to protect as it wants.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you are, like Danny, hoping to have a sort of opt-in method for safe space. Many critics of this would argue that the sort of societies that are going to want to have safe space policy at their events are not the sort of societies that are going to be inviting controversial candidates, and vice versa. I mean, do you think that perhaps this is a naive approach to just offering safe space whenever it's needed? To either of you.
Can you just repeat that?
So this idea that the sort of societies that are going to invite controversial external speakers are going to tend to not want to have safe space, whereas the sort of societies that
it's not
wouldn't.
It's a fair point. I mean, as it currently stands, we don't have an option. If you submit a form for an external speaker request, you get allocated. It's a precondition. You must have safe space marshals will be present at this event. But anyway, just to divert slightly and go back to it, I'm actually interested in what Claudia said, where you actually said that you would take certain events off campus. I think that's abhorrent, actually. This is my university as much as it's any other student. It's every student's university. And for you to say subjectively that certain views cannot be on campus, where do you draw the line with that? It's everyone's campus, and this should be the champion of the free expression of ideas. There's no doubt about it. This should be where every single idea should be expressed, nothing off limits. And it's through that we can stamp out racism, homophobia, and all this abhorrent, hateful language to the sidelines, cast it out to the sidelines. If someone's espousing hateful language, let's call them out. Let's not restrict them and make those ideas more popular off campus.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Claudia in response, and then I want to go to
Um,
Shazwa before we go to questions.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Like, this is our campus, like, this is our home. We should be allowed to voice our opinions. I think with and it is violence, like you discussed that earlier, like there was violence, someone was hospitalized. I feel like if societies want to take that extra precautionary measure to ensure that their speaker is safe and they themselves are safe, then we should give them that option. And they should have that option to be able to take their views off campus, to have their discussion, have their debate, and feel safe, and ensure that nobody comes into that room and, you know, starts a fight and etc.
So has your position changed? Have you given a bit of room to what Danny and Antoine have been saying?
I wouldn't say my position has changed, no, but I do think that you've had both of you, some really insightful ideas.
If you
And
became president, would you be willing to work with them about
Yes,
this?
absolutely, without a doubt. Like, you have to be prepared to work with everybody when you're in a position like this. That you have to be prepared to be diplomatic and give everyone a bit of wiggle room.
Very fair of you. Shazwa, final word from you. What do you make of all of these opinions that have been thrown around? And I'd also quite like a little bit of a firmer stance on safe space with you. You know, do you want reform or do you not? Do you think it's good or do you not?
I think it is good, but we need to have some sort of more.
Safe space is good or free speech is good?
Safe space is slightly good. I think
Compared to free speech?
I think it's slightly I actually take a very moderate approach on this, because I think both are, like, I don't want to be on the extremes over here, because like she said, she was very correct in saying that we are all growing individuals who will be subjected to different problems. And I think he was also right in saying that obviously if it's our university, I shouldn't be having an event outside. So this has to be dealt with a case by case approach. And I totally understand how this is very technically challenging, and like with the bureaucracy you just pointed out. But like we have always pointed out, that's the role we are all signing up for. Like if there is healthy, like whatever we decide on as a student, as a sabbatical team, if we all stand by the same principles, and if we can come to one deciding point, then I see no reason why we cannot. Like the risk assessment, I had also mentioned this in my manifesto. Like, to get an external speaker, it takes 15 working days, and that, in my opinion, is not really well, because I personally remember an event wherein the KCL India Society wanted to invite a very renowned speaker from India. And like, say for instance, when you're working with on some sensitive topics, you cannot have very prominent personalities tell you like 1 month in advance that this is when I will come, or this is when I'm free.
I'm afraid we're going to have to go to Q&A, Danny. I know you have more to add. Do we have any questions about this topic? Yes.
None of you have mentioned this, but I have been to some events where there are very controversial guest speakers who have very strong personalities. And sometimes the student leading the debate, they're not able to control the guest speakers. So I was wondering, would any of you consider having an option for societies to have not a safe space marshal, but an actual adult who's closer to the age of the guest speakers, who can actually stand up to them and tell them, this is not your event, you're just a guest, and to please respect the student leading the debate?
Very interesting idea. Anybody have anything to respond? Carrie?
Yes, I definitely think that's like a brilliant idea, actually. This reminds me a little bit of what's going on in Parliament. I mean, there's also like, I forgot his name, but there's like this guy who always says, I forgot what he's saying now, but he's kind of always like kind of leading, or like not really controlling, but kind of making sure that
The speaker? You're referring to the speaker? Who's sort of
exactly.
delegating, moderating, and so, yeah.
Exactly, like the one who's like kind of, I don't know, let's say the debate going on between May and Corbyn, and they're like almost trying to insult it, almost like to the point where they are not nice to each other anymore, put it like that, and then he's being like, stop it now. And I definitely think that's a brilliant idea.
Any other opinions, Danny?
I think it's an interesting proposal. Like, I'd look into it, but it's very slippery territory in terms of the fact that adult as such could be there in a speech policing role, and they might just start shutting down people. For example, in my opinion, I think that if we're going to tackle any given issue, which is tough, for example, preventing suicide, tackling racism, the Israel-Palestine conflict, anything, it's inevitable that certain people are going to get offended, which is another reason why the safe space policy is completely invalidated. But moreover, it's going to get heated, and it's just the nature of debate. It's the nature of arguments. It happens in the real world when we exit this university. And at the end of the day, this institution, a university, should be to prepare us, and it should be a platform to accelerate our growth, to go out into the real world, So I would possibly entertain it, but as long as they're not in a role of trying to slightly skew or shut down a heated discussion, because that's part and parcel of what debate is.
We have one last question. Gentleman over there. Thank you.
Hello. Just on the topic that you're talking about here, I think the idea of something being controversial is very subjective anyway. So therefore, who's deciding exactly? Is it going to go to one of you, or is it going to be a committee, or what? Who's going to say, oh, this person shouldn't be able to speak here? I think this whole thing started originally when it got on the news and everything was when Jacob Rees-Mogg came to talk to the Conservative Society. And that was when it kind of, I mean, the safe space marshal had already been a thing, but that was when it became like a public knowledge, I guess. And well, it's pretty embarrassing for the university, I think. But also, I personally wouldn't say Jacob Rees-Mogg is remotely controversial. He might have a few opinions that maybe tip some people off, I guess. But like in general, he's fine. And therefore, like, how is this going to work? Like, how is it going to be certain people that deserve to be kind of told they can't speak for some reason like that?
How are these judgments going to be made? Antoine, you haven't spoken in a while.
Yeah, I think that this, as the matter for the Swiss Marshal kind of within societies, it's not a matter of the president of the students' union to decide what happens in private groups organized by the societies. It's to the society's member to decide, and therefore their elected members, the committee. And the committee in societies is far more democratic too, because they're elected directly by members that opt in their society, kind of, while KCLSU president is elected with what, 5% of the total of students. So I think that this, as the marshals within societies, should be decided by each society. And I'm sorry, it's not to KCLSU to decide what will happen in the Labour Society or the Conservative Society, or what will happen in the LGBT plus society. Every society should be has the right to manage it as they want, and to consider what they consider.
Yeah, that is my policy. It should be an opt-in. Societies have a right to decide. And very, very quickly, because I don't want to take anyone else's time. You're completely right. It's very subjective. For example, right now, baseline, a speaker I may find controversial. Shaswat might not find, and Antoine might not, and it could go on forever. So it's best to just say, if you disagree with the speaker, you have the right to protest them peacefully outside the lecture theatre, and we welcome that. Ask them questions in the Q&A, but speech under no circumstances should be shut down at a university which is supposed to be the champion of those very ideals.
Fantastic. Thank you both. Thank you all, in fact, very, very much. We have our final question, and that comes from Rebecca Evans, who is a producer at KCL Radio. Rebecca, thank you for your question.
Good evening. A Freedom of Information request submitted to the university stated that student rent increased by approximately £11.6 million between the 2015 to 16 and 2016 to 17 year, whilst the budget for refurbishment dropped. So my question to you would be, whilst organisations such as Cut the Rent are lobbying for change, how do you seek to actualise this upon election?
An incredibly important issue. Many, many students at this university pay, frankly, far too much money for their rent. Claudia, I'm going to start with you. In your manifesto, you talk about affordability, and you say that I will fight to ensure that King's accommodation is affordable and of a high standard. Many people have been fighting for this cause for a long time. Now, I don't want to diminish from your own capabilities, but what are you going to bring to the table that will actually incite change?
No, again, I mean, it's one of those issues along with mental health and diversity that like comes up every single year. And it's like, what is happening? What is being done? So for me, I think in my manifesto, I suggested, I mean, I guess this isn't really addressing the price tag, which I'll come to, but making sure that people have the most of their halls experience. So creating some sort of, before you get to university, filling out an application of what you kind of expect from your halls and, you know, your experience. Like some people, they come here purely to work hard and study, and that's completely fine. And like,
but I mean, if people are given that sort of option for lots of preferences, isn't that just going to leave more people disappointed when they can't be allocated properly?
That is true, but at least they have that option. They are exercising their right and their voice, and they're being given that option to do so. And talking about accommodation costs, I mean, obviously student accommodation, like it has to come with a student price tag. Otherwise, you know, what's the point? Like it's getting to the point where some of our student accommodation is more expensive than, you know, renting privately, which is atrocious. In terms of tackling this issue, like as I've said, like it's a really difficult one, and campaigning alongside Cut the Rent campaigns, I think is really important and definitely something I will do. And I guess just like trying my best to keep money aside rearrange the budget to kind of cut that and maybe give help to students who need it the most.
So you would be happy to work with an organisation like Cut the Rent?
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah, it's really important.
Fantastic. Okay. Antoine, you were nodding away as well. What do you have to say about this? Because there isn't too much about accommodation prices in your manifesto. Do you think it's an important issue?
They were. Actually, I was hall leader last year, and with Vice President Leo, we organized to open the affordable scheme to international students. And I fight, especially, and I'm sure he remembers, to be sure that it will not decrease the number of beds available for British people, to be sure that we both let people who will not go to accommodation because they already live in London at an affordable price, while also opening it to international students. I also fought for my residents, so I'm from GDSA, and last year it was the only one not to increase prices. Stanford Street was at the same price as mine. I campaigned, I said, we don't have any money invested in our refurbishment and things like that. In the end, Stanford Street had £800 a year of rent, and Moonraker Point added over £100 a week. I fought for my residents. I promised that I will oppose any deal for the rent setting if it increased the prices, and it's worked. And therefore, I think that what we have to consider also, and I've got experience on that because we work on these rent setting events, that KCL accommodation are their own budgets, okay? They don't get money from KCL directly. And
so where do they get their money from? Where is it?
From the rents. But the only thing is that why is
it increasing?
It is increasing because cost is increasing, especially for power and for the local council taxes.
And it's also £50 a year per person.
No. So basically, for Moonraker Point, it's not a KCL-owned building. So they rent it to Unite students, and therefore it's according to the price that Unite students ask. For Stamford Street, why it became more expensive, it is because they invested. I know it's a slow refurbishment, but it's still a refurbishment, and therefore people who are in Stamford Street are paying the small extra fees for paying for their refurbishment.
Does that mean then that Unite students is simply bullying Kings into getting the prices?
No, because it's still cheaper than if you take directly to Unite student, because we take a few hundred beds, so we have a price because we buy a lot of we reserve.
Okay,
and just the difference is that KCL accommodations are a bit cheaper than the price of the market by the fact that it is not making profits. It just a balance of zero.
Just because it doesn't make profits doesn't mean that the prices are fair. I mean, if a student at Moonraker is paying currently over £300.
It's £399 a week.
Their rent. I don't think that they would care whether the university is making profits on it or not.
No, I do agree. I'm just saying that first, if you ask to go to Moonraker, you have to ask especially for it because it's like £400 a week, so you can't ask for everyone to have access to that. And I agree, but what I'm saying is just everyone can promise that they will decrease prices, but where they will find the money, because we're talking about thousands of beds. So even to reduce from £1 a week, you have to reduce of 6,000. How do you find this money? So I'm just realistic, saying we're making efforts to expand the caste system, so the affordable scheme, as I did in the rent setting events, but we can't do more than expanding slowly and earning.
We can't do more. In your experience, is what you're saying.
Yeah. In my experience, and we were negotiating with a team, so with the people who are working full time there, were like adults, not student Kings and everything. And basically, we had the choice between not increasing fees but not expanding the affordable scheme, or expanding the affordable schemes and spending a bit less on refurbishment. And we decided to make it more affordable, because why did we choose to add £100 to Moonraker? It's because people who choose to go to Moonraker have money to go there, and they will go to private accommodation of the same rank if it wasn't there proposed by Kings. And so we try to make like that, to make people who can spend more, and people who can spend less have more access to the affordable scheme.
Well, I certainly hope you're right. I mean, Danny, you look quite keen to speak. The university, many would argue, is an incredibly highly commercialized machine. It's operating with millions and millions of pounds when it comes to these accommodations. Why should students trust you to be the voice that stands up for it and actually makes change?
Well, first of all, there's a limit to the amount of power that we would have as presidential sort of officers in the student union to actually influence this. One thing that we could do would pressurize the University King's College London itself I do like that application idea that Claudia gives. But in addition to that, I think it's poor circumstances, really, when you have the university giving new students a binary choice, which is for your first year, you have the opportunity to get these accommodations, you get allocated one, and if you refuse to take it, you're basically on the street. I think that's a really bad thing. And more importantly, these increase in prices are going to hit people from the working class backgrounds and the poorest people the most disproportionately. And that's not good. So I think what should happen is more resources should be diverted into bursaries for people from lower economically developed backgrounds, and that should be sort of subtracted off any rent. I think that's a much more sort of sustainable system.
Antoine, you were
that's already that's already how the affordable scheme is done. It's depending on your parents' wages, and therefore it's already in place that kind of policies.
But do you think that it's good enough?
Well, I mean, I can tell you exactly what they say. So basically,
help its students.
In the rent settings events, we've got the budget. So we say either we increase the number of affordable beds, but if we do so, we will decrease the money less, the difference, you know. So it's either 100 beds with £50 less or 1,000 beds with only £5 less.
So what you're saying is the guarantee of accommodation is worth the amount of money that people are spending? Because King's guarantee accommodation for people...
Yeah, only for first years. But yeah, they do guarantee. And I think we've got really... The accommodation teams are really, really keen on that in a way that they're making trust. Many universities ask for you to have a deposit. At King's, we don't ask for a deposit. This means that there's a really high no-show turnout. And this is because we say, we guarantee you an accommodation, but if you find better, we will not take your money, we will not take your deposits. If you find better, just go. We're just providing this service at the best we could do.
So would you work with Cut the Rent, or do you think they're not entirely necessary?
Sorry?
Would you work with the organisation Cut the Rent, who are hoping to reduce the amount of rent that students
Yeah,
pay?
well, of course, I will campaign. My goal is not to raise prices, obviously. I'm just saying I also have to be realistic. So I will fight for a decrease, but I'm just saying, honestly, there isn't that much hope to succeed to have like £100 less a month.
Oh, rather pessimistic, I suppose, but very interesting take on it. Shazwa, what do you have to say about this?
I think this is a matter of student experience, because I remember in first year when I came to this country as an international student, I had to choose between going out with my fresher friends or have a good dinner, like at a good fancy place. So my point over here is, as he pointed out, it's not very much or completely in the hands of the president, this particular task of allotting the rent over here. And this, like from a news article I was reading a few days ago, it's either the National Office of Education or National Office for Students, one of these two, which actually looks into all this. And this, in my opinion, requires lobbying on an international level, because I personally feel it's not in the hands of the president or the vice president or the five of them all together to decide on the rent for next year. This is like, I think, and one more thing which Kings, I think like my facts are incorrect, or what I was presented just now was incorrect, because from what I have seen with the people I know, once you have signed a contract with one of the King's accommodation like Stamford Street or GDS, you cannot leave it even if you find another accommodation, unless you find someone who's ready to take over your contract, firstly. And secondly, one simple solution apart from the lobbying is King's or KCLSU, whichever, whenever we are welcoming students who are not very well aware of how things work in London, they should be presented with private accommodation opportunity, private housing opportunities and options, in my opinion. Like if I look for a flat, like if I decide to stay in a flat, like that is a decision which I'm taking. That is always, from what I have seen, cheaper than a student accommodation. Obviously, we might argue that it's not good for a student experience. But say, for instance, I cannot afford £250 a week, and I'm paying £250 a week just to stay in a college accommodation. I'm anyways not getting the student experience I came here for. So
what are the practical changes that you would make based on that?
I think students should know about the options. Like there are various rental agencies like Zoopla being one of them online. There are so many such options which offer cheap accommodation to students. Like you can get flats. You can just.
So you think the university should invest in better education of the students who are coming to the university?
That's not better. Like that, I think this investment is not much. Like just telling a new student who's coming about it. Like they just need to be better informed. Because when I.
But why would the university do that if it's trying to fill bedrooms?
If it is, that's completely, that comes down to the question if you want to actually get a good student experience or be a money-making machine.
Interesting. Carrie, we'll finally come to you. Again, no mention of accommodation in your manifesto. There's a lot going on here. What is your stance? Do you wish to be someone who's going to lead this sort of movement against rising prices, or are you happy with how it is at the moment?
Okay, so first of all, I live in a private, like I went privately, so I didn't even know anything because I was allocated in Stanford and my campus is like in Denmark Hill. I was like, I'm not going to do that. So this is why I'm renting privately. So I wasn't really aware of these issues either, I have to say. The only thing that I would say definitely we should lead that on. Like it can't be possible that like someone who can't afford to live in a student accommodation for like such a high price, like I pay £350 per week in a really spacious studio. So, and compared to like, if I think Antoine said like £400 per week for like, I don't know, for like a really small, basically just a bed and maybe a bathroom.
No, the 499, the 399 a week is more than just a bed. You've got like a double bed and like a bath and everything.
Oh, yeah,
Luxury.
but still, it's like still kind of small. So I definitely would also work together with Cut the Rent. And I think definitely that, that also like as a president, it's also our responsibility to do that. To basically, as I said, like listen to what the students want. We should decrease the prices. We should work with Cut the Rent. We should find maybe sponsors outside of the university who might be able to just sponsor some amount of it. So in order to decrease the prices for the students.
Antoine, very briefly.
Yeah, we already have that. Ben & Jerry's is sponsoring. It's why you have like free Ben & Jerry's and things like that. It's sponsoring. We really like, honestly, I don't want to be like negative and anything, but I think we really do the maximum. And like rent setters are not very working for Kings and for students. They're not like, oh yeah, we're gonna make price go higher or anything like that.
Shazwa, I'm really sorry. We very, very briefly then.
Very, very briefly to the point which you had stated to me that universities, they won't be able to fill beds. Like even if universities do advertise it, there are many private accommodations which offer at least 40 to 50% higher rents like Unite and Urbanist. So the point is, even if the universities do, there is still sufficient demand to be met by university halls. So it's just a trade-off between them not making profits and giving those profits to those private agencies like Urbanist or something.
Interesting. Thank you very much. We're going to have a Q&A now about that particular topic. Anybody at all? Wow, okay. Oh, Siri, yes. Can we have a microphone for Siri, please?
So I just want to clarify, King's Residences, so they are, we know for sure they're not a profit-making entity?
Well, no, it's not exactly that. Like legal investors, they can, but they're not. Like I can't tell you more because we've got a privacy agreement, but basically they don't make money, basically. They spend nearly everything in refurbishments and buying new halls because we created two new halls last year. And basically they don't get a single penny from King's itself.
Then,
it's a separate entity,
Antoine,
so we can't give money. And same, we can't put caps because KCL has no authority on.
It's very interesting you've mentioned those two new halls. You're speaking about Vauxhall and Atlas, I think, right? Well, do you think, and this actually applies to all of the candidates since we're short of questions on this topic, do you think that the university should be making halls that are so expensive and in such disproportionate locations that perhaps out budget students who simply can't afford them? Are these the sorts of accommodations that we should be really fighting for, or should we be fighting for accommodations that perhaps not as nice, perhaps still does the job and still is fair to students, but is frankly just more affordable? Because in the end, if there are students who can't come to King's because they're afraid about the housing prices and the accommodation prices, and King's doesn't offer a solution, is that really fair? Are we truly encouraging a diverse university community? Danny, you can first.
I think the latter, it would be good. Students would, I think, put up with a smaller accommodation, which will be a more affordable price. But at the end of the day, we also have to be pragmatic about this and realist. We're in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And to try and get cheaper rent is it's an uphill task, to say the least. So all we can do, in my opinion, is try and reach out to those sort of lower working class individuals and students who come to the university who struggle with this, because the ones having the problem with it are them. The upper middle class students who come from abroad are not necessarily having issues with this sort of rent.
Yeah.
Shazwa, sorry, you were next.
I think, like you pointed out, like the university should cater for those students who cannot afford, and I, in my opinion, don't find it justified to have accommodations with such luxurious facilities and being charged so much. There are already so many private companies which offer those services. So as a university, you should not target at offering luxury to those who can afford. You should, in my opinion, rather be focusing on students, like at least for their survival, of those who cannot afford to stay in such accommodations.
Interesting.
Yeah, super quickly, basically, I agree with what we said, but we do have different kinds. We've got, like, for instance, some are with a bathroom shared, which are less expensive. They're only $149 a week, and which is still expensive, I agree, but it's still less expensive than the $399, for instance, with a bath and everything. However, the thing is that people coming from abroad and really rich persons still do exist. If King's is saying it's shared bathroom or nothing, they will go to private accommodations, while out of the $399, there is some £20 or something like that goes to pay the affordable scheme, that goes to reduce the price of the $149, which is bath shared. It will be $169 without the $399 paying for the one. So basically, if you put them out if you decide that people who have more money to spend on accommodation shouldn't have that, they will spend this money on private accommodation, and it will make rent more expensive also for the less good.
So you think it's a good balance at this point, Antoine? You think it's a good balance? It balances itself out?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that if you don't provide luxurious accommodation, there is a market for luxurious accommodation, and these people will go to private accommodation, which means that we will not make benefits on this one, which means that King's accommodations of standard levels will have prices go up.
Fantastic.
So this is like beneficial to have this, isn't it?
Okay, thank you, all five of you, very, very much. That's the end of the set questions. We now have a Q&A that is open to the floor about any of the issues that we have not spoken about today. No doubt there are plenty of them. Let's start with our current sitting president for the Student Union, Ahad Mahmood. Thank you, Alan.
Sorry, I have a few questions. I'll try and be quick. This is regarding the role itself, and this is basically two questions jumbled in one. This is for all the candidates. So this is, the fact is that obviously from many of your manifestos, and also this is an experience that you have if you do get the position, that many students will look to you for strong leadership and taking strong chances, and maybe perhaps doing things that you're not able to do because obviously there are structures in place in June, because obviously it's a charity, it's a company, and it's also an organization that you don't have as much perhaps say as you would perhaps believe that you do. And also there are a lot of processes perhaps within King's that sometimes it is a struggle and an uphill task to achieve a lot in a short period of time. So how would you tackle that? Additionally, there's also the fact that, so as president, you attend slightly more meetings and slightly more significant meetings in terms of counterparts, even though the level of power within the organization is the same. So how will you work with your colleagues within the SU, because without them you can't do much, while also empowering their work, even if you don't necessarily believe in what their manifestos or their political opinions are?
Right, who would like to start with that first? Shazad.
Firstly, with the point of view saying like working with a team, right? Like if I'm not correct, I target that first. I think that is what the induction period of every sabbatical officer during July and August is all about. You get to know the sabbatical team, you get to know about their manifestos, about their ideas, and you develop a basic vision for the year, firstly. And secondly, I think one thing which I think is slightly lacking in KCL Student Union is the students are never really aware of what is happening. The only reason I know some things is because I'm a part of a society and I get a mail which is from the activities team at the end of every month. So I'm slightly aware of what the activities team is doing, because I understand, like, as I've seen you people work, I think there's a lot you guys have done, but since students don't know about it, they often do question, and they will always question that what have you exactly done in this 1 year? You've done a lot throughout the year. I feel if students don't know about what you have done throughout continuously, like you can't just send one annual report at the end of the year or an AGM when not many people actually come also to tell them what you have done. People in that case would not really know what you have done. You need proper sound marketing. Like this is not, you don't need a separate position or a separate officer for that. Like this should be the role of every single officer and his own responsibility and accountability, that he markets what he does so that people know, and it doesn't come to a point when people question you if you're doing your job.
So Shazwa, you think there should be greater accountability for these roles?
Yeah.
Okay, Antoine.
Definitely.
Yeah, I understood what you said, and I think we should make in October or November of next year a kind of student summit where all students, not just the one interested in KCL SU politics, should participate. We could do events and ask questions. And you ask about like the neutrality kind of the president in some aspect. I think we should have a president who could here during this summit. We could talk about, for instance, the 40% cap for delayed essays. We could talk about NUS membership. And I think the president, if we do this summit, should not give his advice on that, and that we should let students talk about it, raise issues, and then vote on these issues. And yeah.
Antoine, I'd just like to say, you mentioned the NUS. Are you saying that you would like to have a referendum on being a part
Yeah,
of
yeah,
it?
yeah. It's on my manifesto. I want a referendum on that, but I'm not gonna say if I'm gonna vote yes or no because I do, as a NUS delegate, we do realize the advantages of the NUS, but I also see the weakness. So I just don't want to. I'm 50-50, but it's also I'm not gonna do my opinion of my vote, but I will have a vote and trying to have both opinions in a debate.
What does anybody else have to say about perhaps what I had said or about what Antoine has said about the costs that we have to oblige to being a member of the NUS? Carrie, you have something to say?
Yes, definitely. Like with working in a team, I think that's definitely very important. Like as you said, like staying neutral means obviously what's like also like what I said, like taking everything into consideration. And obviously, if there might be like some controversial going on, then I think the only reason, the only possibility to make this work would be by democratic vote, basically. That's like for the neutral aspect that I wanted to say. And with the thing where you said like that there might be some issues that we can't tackle down, I think it's like important to try everything as much as possible and to be transparent about every process to the students, to tell them this is what we did. And unfortunately, if it doesn't work out, unfortunately, it didn't work out, but we tried everything we could to make it work.
Danny?
Yeah, I think that was quite a sort of sobering question in terms of the fact that we have to accept like our power will have, in essence, checks and balances on it. There'll be people around us, but it's foundational that that's there because we're not assuming autocratic authority of the student union and being a dictator. So that's obviously important. But obviously, in addition to that, I do think that sometimes even if things are not possible, I reject that. Because I think that there always is an alternative you can provide, alternative solutions by engaging with local stakeholders. And sometimes you're going to have to put things on the initiative on your own and not lead from the bottom up, but from the top down. As an example, I don't think any of the candidates today have addressed environmental policy. And this is something which is absolutely crucial. Our environment is obviously being degraded by the day, by the year. Climate change is in action. And you might have to implement that yourself. It might not come from your accompanying student officers.
It's interesting you've talked about the environment and sustainability. I know for a fact that Claudia has mentioned the environment in her. She's talked about keeping campuses eco-friendly, no mention working with the states or sustainability. How is this going to be actualized though, Claudia?
I mean, let's just look at the weather in February. I mean, we've got 18-degree heat. Like this is clearly an issue and it needs to be addressed. And if we can just make a small step on our campuses and like in our lives and encourage people as well at home to be doing their best and trying to go green in their own homes. I think maybe setting up like recycling points on campuses, things for like batteries, etc. And also a scheme to provide moon cups as well. Sanitary waste is a massive factor and a massive drain on our resources.
You've also mentioned King Sustainability in your manifesto. What exactly would you like to work with them about?
Sorry.
You mentioned King Sustainability,
Yeah.
the department here at the university. What sort of work would you like to do with them?
Well, just kind of like continuing their work in general. I think they've made some good progress and just kind of assisting them in their like mission.
Okay, interesting. Can we have another question, please? Or I had very, very briefly.
Just to repeat that, because you didn't answer the question, is within the students' union itself, the power of the president is practically the same as the other officers. But so my question is again, what would you do to empower your colleagues, so the rest of the officers, in their manifestos, even if you wouldn't agree with their manifestos or their political opinions, how would you empower them in your meetings and with the college?
Very briefly, Danny.
Integrate them into decision making is clearly the ideal solution to that. They've also got elected on manifestos which students have voted for, so they have equal representation in a student executive body such as that. But I still think that's not to say that they have equal weight in terms of their views and what actually has the final call. The decision should be consulted with all the sabbatical officers, all the student officers, but the final call would obviously be the president's, right? So,
interesting. Another question, please. Yes, the gentleman in the black top.
Thank you. We've heard a lot of interesting policies and promises this evening, but I'd like to know in 18 months' time, what's the one sort of headline policy that if you haven't fulfilled that we can really hold you to account for? So just one thing that you really want to see changed in 18 months' time. even if nothing else gets changed? Because I think there have been some big promises, but I'd like to see like one thing that you'll definitely fulfill.
Let's keep this very brief. Let's go along the row. Claudia, can we start with you, please?
I mean, just off the top of my head, but it is something that I think is really important, and I do mention it in my manifesto. So library fines, obviously, we've all got some, haven't we? I've got too many. Yes. So during Rag Week, our money that we pay for our fines go to charity. And I think it is such a great week. I think it's really important, and I'd like to do that every single month. There'll be a week from it that money will go towards charities, and I'll work with societies at King's, so societies such as LGBT+ and also Hot Chocolate. So the money goes where societies would like it to go.
Claudia, a fantastic sentiment, no doubt about it. Giving money to charities is a wonderful thing. Might I just add, though, perhaps you're not tackling the root of the problem there. Lots of people get library fines. No one is really helping them not to. How would you tackle that?
I mean, I do think it comes down to, it's a student's responsibility. Like, it's a student's organization. You can renew online. Like, I don't think it comes down to, I have to tackle the root of a person not returning their book on time. Like, I don't return my books on time. Like, I think it really is just, it's down to an individual. Like, it should be, you know, you should be encouraged that you should return your books, but yeah.
Antoine, your policy.
Yeah, so I think the policy I will absolutely need to realize will be to have this summit, the student summit, by the end of next fall. Just because I think it's really important to put everyone, not only everyone interested, but everyone to talk and to know about, because many people don't know about the NUS and everything like that, and to have references on what people think important. So the NUS, the 40% cap, King's Vision 2029, so that kind of thing should be debated, and I think I, as president, I should do my best to make that debated.
How are you going to encourage people to engage with that sort of summit? You can host a summit.
Oh yeah. So basically, I was thinking of putting stands within campuses, and basically also work with KCL, with the teachers and things like that. And I just think it will be more useful to have everyone thinking about it, including the teachers, in events, during events and debates and things like that, than having surveys, because I just think we have too many surveys. We've got after modules, we've got the KCL's SU module thing, the library surveys, and I just think like adding surveys and surveys, people just are bored, and you will have like 3 people answering at each survey. It's enough, and it's not connecting people. So I think this will be a real way to improve if we made the staff work with it and make it on-campus physical events.
Fantastic, thank you. Shazwa.
One thing I think I'd be very willingly accountable for every day of my job is empowering everyone, like from the association to the societies. I feel it all comes down, like even my vice presidents and all my sabbatical team, everyone should know that when we are working in a team of 5 in that room as a KCL-SU SAP team, I'm not the boss over there. We are all accountable to students, and if all my liberation officers, like if their funding is increased, like I had mentioned, £200 for a people of color association is actually nothing with experience, I could say. Like if all the communities, their fundings are increased and students and individuals are supported and they feel empowered, then this change will come from students. One person can just give his interpersonal skills and his dedication and passion. The change has to come from all 30,000 students. So I would, in my opinion, be held accountable just to empower everyone, like from the association leads to society presidents, to students, to my SAP team and everyone. That's my stand.
Shazwa, empowering people is a fantastic thing, and I think everyone should feel empowered in whatever way they can. But it's a very intangible and forgive me for saying, but perhaps wishy-washy claim that is very hard to hold you accountable to. How are we going to hold you accountable for empowering people?
Firstly, the associations which actually represent all forms of the society, like from we have got Women Association, Riding Participation, Disability and everything, they need more funding, and those officers need proper orientation and training, because when I became a people of color officer, all I had was a 45-minute training, which was all about telling me what my role is.
So money and more training.
Yeah, they need more training. Like even like I understand we do not have sufficient resources to pay them, and that is totally justified, but at least they should have the funding as an association. Like I don't think £200 like is justified on any grounds, or anyone among the 5 of us or anyone in this audience would say that £200 is enough for a year. Like an association not even being given £1 a day. So I think that's the first step, that we need to have our association and bodies which are associated with to have more money to work on.
Yeah, and I would just add
Very
that,
briefly.
Yeah, I agree with him, especially because liberation, things like people of color and LGBT have free membership So they don't make money on membership because it's to unify and liberation thing. So they need even more money than the other associations that do have fees.
Thank you both. Danny, what's your policy?
Yeah, once again, with regards to that, I don't know what the term liberation actually means. Liberate from what? But based on my first policy, I think that considering that university should be the platform to make you adaptable to the real world and gain real life skills, I think that an innovative idea would be to have real life skills workshops. So, for example, bring in experts of informative talks and seminars on, for example, topics like how to file taxes, how do you apply for a mortgage, what is credit. This is something which is unprecedented, and it'll be actually quite educational. I think a lot of students kind of are blasted out into the world after they finish university and the bubble pops and then reality sets in. And we can kind of bridge that by doing these real life workshops to ease that transition.
Thank you very much. And Carrie, finally from you.
Yes, I definitely think the mental health issue, especially since we are like, since we like at the IOPP and we have like overall like at King's, we have the connection to the Maud Slay, we have connection to a lot of clinical psychologists. So I think we should be able to establish the mental health issue in 18 months.
Fantastic. Thank you all very much. I'm afraid we have run out of time for questions. We really had to do our best there, but unfortunately we don't have any more time. What I'm going to do now is give all of the candidates the opportunity to make a 30-second final closing statement. Let's start at this end this time. Carrie, give us 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So, yeah, we heard a lot today, but I just wanted to let you know, like, no matter what happens, it's all about you guys. Your voice is like, will be heard if you vote for me, basically.
Fantastic. Thank you. Danny?
I think it's clear that currently in its current form, the student union is broken. It needs a transformation, not a reformation. New initiatives have to be implemented into it. There needs to be a revamping of mental health care, tackling with the key root causes. There needs to be an unwavering commitment inscribed in the student union to freedom of speech, to make sure no events, as we've seen over the past year, can ever be replicated ever again. We should be the shining beacon of a university for the rest of the UK and really set a precedent with this. And that's what you'll get with me.
Thank you. Shazwad?
I have been a part of the student union movement. I have been a part of one of the largest societies of Kings. And all I would say is all I have gained is an insight on how students, all of us, face problems of all kinds throughout our journey at university and how this actually affects and torments our student experience. So all I would request is to consider me for the reason that I am a student who has faced challenges, and I feel I should be that one person who's willing to hear to everyone, like as much as practically possible. I want to be that bridge who's there to understand your problem and work towards it. I cannot promise that everything I say today, like all my manifesto points will be covered, but what I can promise is you will see that we all are working towards it together, and I'm working and I will make significant, markable progress, which can be noted throughout the year. So just consider deeply and vote for someone who you think is actually passionate and committed to deliver something to the students.
Thank you very much. Antoine?
Yeah, so I will say that I'm not promising things like some people say that rent will go down and things like that. And obviously it will not happen. I think I've got the experience to work both with the NUS and with the residences and with the KCLSU. And all of that make me having a realistic thing. For instance, as whole leader, I promised things, all were done, like literally all, even the 23-7 noise-free policies, because I'm not promising things that are not reachable. What I promise is reachable, and I've always done what I promised. And also, I would like to say that we do have, it's not about my conclusion, we do have life skill policies. It's in residences. It's open not only for residents, but also for all KCL students. And it just made in residences and not on campus for the single reason that people live close to residents. Nobody lives, or few students lives on the Strand.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And last, but certainly not least, Claudia.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think kind of sharing everyone's sentiments, like I'm not here to change the world, but I am here to make sure your university experience is everything that you expect, everything you want, and that you feel valued and you feel listened to by your potential presidential candidate. So yes, Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Had a great time.
Thank you all very, very much. I think I'd just like to say, regardless of whether you agree with anybody in front of you or not, I think it's pretty safe to say that their hearts are in the right place and they want to make good, positive change at this university. In the end, so can you, and you can do that by voting when it comes to these elections. You have some fantastic candidates in front of you who want to do great things at this university, so please don't miss your opportunity to make sure that your voice actually is heard. I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of the 5 candidates who came today, who've spoken fantastically well and are probably very tired after nearly 2 hours of pretty intense interrogation. So a round of applause for them. Thank you. I think the last thing I'd like to say is that, if Thomas could perhaps do that, a lot of people here have worked incredibly hard to put on this event, to make this event live, broadcast it live on many of the student media platforms. That involves our tech team up there, our camera team to the left and right. If any of you are particularly interested in what student media does, well, this is what we do. We try and get information out to you, the students, to make sure that you have a good sense of important things like the student union elections. If you're interested, I urge you, go online, visit our web pages, visit our Facebook pages and our social media. We'd love to hear from you, hear from what you have to say. And this entire event is going to be turned into a fully edited film that we will be putting on all of our platforms. So for everyone whose friends and family couldn't make it, they will be able to see it again afterwards. I'd like to give a big thank to all of you, the audience here. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We really, really appreciate it. And best of luck with everyone's endeavours here. Thank you very much.